The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to another episode of Paranormal Planet. I am your host, Kalila, and tonight we have a very special guest all the way from exotic Morocco. We have Mr. Jamal Morelli, and he is a very good friend of mine for many, many decades, and he has agreed to come on here and share some stories about the real stories about the Djinn. We've heard a lot about that in all of these paranormal television shows, and people are always talking about them and writing about them. We want to know it's a little bit more than, the stories you've heard about Aladdin and the lamp. So let's welcome. Thank you, Jamal, for joining us today.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Kalila. It's really nice to connect and reconnect with you. I think anybody who thinks that about the genie in the lamp, they're beyond saving, Kalila. I don't think anything in any maybe a lifetime's worth of podcast is not going to cure that person. So when it came to these stories about genies, I don't really know that I had a fixed idea about what I thought they were before I got to Morocco. I will say, and feel free to cut me off with any relevant questions, because otherwise I'll just continue.
It's fascinating. Go with it.
I as a musician went to Morocco in 1998 in order to become the ultimate musician, because as you know, a musician wants to reach people on a level that is something profound. It means something to us to see people cry and stand up and start shouting and have awakenings. This is a success. Well, in Morocco, it's just called Tuesday. That's what you're supposed to do as a musician. It's not a kind of like once in a lifetime experience. People pay for that, and when you go and perform, you've got to be doing that for approximately sometimes 12 hours. It's a 12-hour performance where you're working with the Djinn for 12 hours. And the people who pay for these experiences don't have to be rich. Necessarily. Some rich people do hold their own private ceremonies and things like that for their Djinn, which I'll mention in a second. Usually if you throw the party, it's called a lila. It just means night. It's not like a special word. A lila is a night. But when you hear about a lila, people know that you might mean night, but you also might mean a ritual night. And your relationship with a Djinn determines what kind of things you're going to buy to attract and appease and appeal to that particular Djinn, right? You'll surround the room with specific colored incense and types of incense. You'll wear particular colored clothes and a specific type of fabric. And So these things interested me. I just, again, on a rather cosmetic level of, I want to be that guy who gets everybody super duper excited as a musician. I wasn't interested in the spiritual side of anything at that time.
You were very young, and you were very young back then. You were like what? And you were in your 20s, right? You were pretty young.
No, I'm just about as stupid as I was then. That part hasn't changed that much.
Come on.
I haven't matured that much, but yes, you're right. I probably
You're a
I
kid. I mean,
no, for sure. Yeah, I wanted the what I saw as kind of the trappings of rock star, power, and I thought that's what I was going for. And so what I found that I'm going to be sharing with you was something very, very different. It's here we're talking about Morocco. I can't speak for what the relationship between the Djinn, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa is. It's very different,
of course, right.
right? But here it's a syncretic version of Islam, or right. So Islam came here about 1,300 years ago and kind of papered over religions that had existed before with the Shilha and the Rifi. And then later, when they were bringing slaves across the kind of trans-Saharan slave trade, they brought the same religions here that they did to the United States. So the voodoo's cousin and sisters are here, and they're very, very much alive in every city, rather than it being kind of a New Orleans thing or a, whatever. It's spread throughout the entire country. You can find it anywhere. And so just kind of doubling back, I'll tell you what I saw the very, very first night. Since I think that makes it kind of the everyman story, the story that anyone would experience. As a foreigner, I was kind of sat down right next to the chief of the Ganawa. Now, the Ganawa is a religious fraternity, and this man was dressed in a giant red jalaba and a fez, one of those red fezes that's covered with cowrie shell. Again, kind of sending us back to their West African roots, and
Right.
They always like to sit a stranger down next to them. Some of it's because it's there's a barakah, there's a blessing in having a stranger with you, and of course some of it is I'm a foreigner who probably has a little bit more money, so why not give him the best? And so if I were to describe the surroundings, the chief had his ensemble, and all of them were wearing matching white jalaba, and he was playing a bass guitar that was made from a tree trunk, and so when he hit these, I think it was catgut or goat gut intestinal strings. So when he'd hit this, you could feel it in the entire room. You could definitely feel it inside your own chest when he'd hit this bass. The percussion consisted of giant metal castanets called qarqaba, and it's not an appealing sound. It's not like, it's definitely nothing you would be able to balance your budget with. It's a kind of thing you could drive out nasty neighbors with. It's very, very jarring. But what happens is that after a while, it becomes like white noise, and you start to hear things inside all of that noise that maybe you're imagining it. You're hearing maybe voices, for example, are starting to come up in that white noise, and maybe that's why they do it. Well, the music was playing, and I'll kind of and so the dancing is a lot of maybe the most familiar analog for most of your listeners. I guess if we got a lot of people in the States, would maybe be like a revival, people who are allowing themselves to let the spirit inside them, and some people passing out because they can feel they're feeling the music. But where things took a turn that I'm not sure if this happens in revival places, there was a 7-year-old girl who came in. She still had her little backpack on from evening classes. And she sat down, and I smiled and waved her. She smiled and waved back, and it seemed like a kind of a normal thing. I turned to look at the musicians who had stuck their faces in a brazier, in a kind of in a giant burning bowl of ash, and they lifted their faces out, and it was rather dramatic because they had these kind of dripping ash, stony faces with the smoke still coming off of it, and they were singing, and again, what we're calling singing anyway, mostly kind of a shouting, and when I looked back at the girl, she was already full on just smashing her head again and again against the ground, which I've got to say, there's probably very few states, even in southern states, where smashing a kid's head usually upsets people. It scares us.
Yeah.
It scares us. Look, if you're from the Northeast, it definitely scares you. I think that, again, the further you go into different parts of America, it becomes more of like
we Southerners think so.
Yeah, well, some people will just be like, "Oh, I just did that to my kid yesterday," or something like that. But it was very hard, very, very hard for me to not feel compelled to want to put my hands underneath her head and stop this from happening. In fact, that's what I finally just decided. I don't really care. I'm over it. The last 50 minutes of Karkaba and goat gut tree trunk bass sounded like the previous 50 minutes to that. And I don't think it's going to all of a sudden turn into some Wagnerian thing where a woman comes in and starts singing in more than 5 notes. No, I was pretty sure I've seen enough. This kid looks like she's about to go from concussion to coma. And I was pulled back. And even though I did, my Arabic couldn't have been good enough at the time for somebody to explain this to me. That I'm sure of. Whoever spoke English told me that if you stop this girl now, she will die. You will kill her, because now her Djinn is protecting her. She has this relationship with her Djinn. The Djinn's the one who's doing it. Now, the words they used, they would say, they used something I think similar to voodoo. They said like riding her.
Yes, she's being written. Yes, I understand that.
And another word they used, it was meskun, which just kind of really just means to live in or to inhabit, like to just, yeah. Meskun is to be.
I comprehend that. Yeah, she was being written. Yeah, totally.
Yes. Yeah, that was one bit. I think the word, yeah, at the time, I'm pretty sure he was trying to say she was inhabited, and that I needed to back off. Well, it that's tricky, right? Because you're not 100% impressed by anything in your immediate environment to make you feel like, why would you trust these people anyway? You wouldn't trust them in an ER. So why all of a sudden would you let a 7-year-old do this? And so I don't know what. I think I was just scared that he was right. And I trusted the fact that I was new to the scene, and how many dead kids are they really going to have? He must have known what he was talking about. And sure enough, Well, for him, not for me. He was right. She was totally smiling, fine. They gave her some, for me, undrinkable buttermilk, and she was just totally fine. She was sitting there listening to the rest of the night, and again smiling and waving at me. And I was kind of like, I wasn't sure how many of me she was seeing, but
Wow.
yeah,
That's
that was my first encounter with the Djinn, in a way where it's like, all right, so when a person talks to me about Djinn in Morocco, I think of that. I think of that's the kind of relationship you can be expected to have. They give you a power that enables you to go beyond pain. It gives you a power that enables you to feel quite young again, as in the case, for example, when I've seen octogenarians going into trance and just kind of throwing themselves into the middle of a floor. And again, this very kind of, I think, revival-y type of stuff. Again, the difference there is the violent aspect of it. I don't know. I don't know what happens in churches because, I like to enjoy my life, so I don't go into them. But but I'm sure. No, I'm sure there's some fun stuff that happens. The watching them throw people off of them, people trying to calm them down because they're punching out and they're dangerous. So some of the other people try to subdue them and they can't. And when you're watching these older people hobble their way into the Layla and hobble their way out, one part of you is like, okay, this is the state fair snake oil thing. But then you realize wait, this person's my neighbor. Like, I know for a fact this is the way they are every day. And it's just during that trance that they find this power. So how does that happen? I honestly, Kalila, I don't know. But that, I will now shut up for a moment or two so you can...
Well, from a spirit, I understand it, because as you know, I spent over 20 years in voodoo, and now, I've been probably close to 20 years in Santeria, which is a little bit different. We spend a little more time in what's called spiritual misas, and there's a large focus on mediumship development in Santeria that we don't have in voodoo. So there's not as much ritual per se with the religious aspect, because we are in New Orleans, we're not in Miami, obviously. But more time spent in misas and really just kind of communication and a little bit differences, but basically all the same. It's still an African Caribbean religion nonetheless. And, I've seen people in Cuban rituals that were, taken by the Orisha. And, you just step back, and let them be who they're going to be and, do what they're going to do. And, they'll call out, and they do the same things, the drumming and the dancing. And it's interesting because you're talking about, as you're explaining this music that's not really appealing, because you have to look at it, and you as a musician know, well, first off, everything in the whole universe is vibration, and music is vibration. So, that lower vibrational spirits that they're calling up is going to have that lower, dense kind of vibrational type of music that is almost offensive to our ears, if that makes sense.
When we say it's almost offensive to our ears, there's a version of this music that is meant for public consumption, and they do sell it, and they do and people do listen to it at home, and it's you could listen to it right now and enjoy it. But the stuff that is meant for the ritual itself is it's not. It definitely is functional. It would be more like listening to a brown noise, something on Spotify where you just like, let me hear the sound of a fan making love to a Coke machine or something like that. It's not. It's just sounds of machines. Like,
But it's
so
changing the vibratory rate to open up that portal is what's really, from a spiritual perspective, what it's doing is it's lowering the vibration so that portal opens. They're opening that door with that vibration, So in other words, like in mediumship, when we want to do a seance per se, we want to open up the portal to talk to people's loved ones. We're going to raise the vibration. You say you don't know what happens like in church or, people sing, they play music, they sing, they're raising the vibration because, they want to open up those higher vibrational portals, to get in touch with those spirits that are kind of higher elevation, a little bit higher up to God's consciousness. When you start dealing with these more earthbound spirits or, even the lower vibrational ones that are further away from God's consciousness, you've got to go with that lower, vibrational thing. And it's got to be very, very repetitive in order to get that portal open, to get that vibration rate going to where you match it. You got to match that vibration rate. And that's what we're dealing with here. So I understand it. I when you really break it down to that, it's all about the vibration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, what we could do is, because I'd like to ask you a few questions right now, but I'm going to move on.
Yeah.
You were talking about, you wanted to kind of focus on the Djinn. And since we just kind of, I think, completed a module, if you will, on the Djinn and its relation to the sensual, like sound, incense, whatever. There are people here who it has nothing to do with, like, they don't need anything to have this happen to them. They are possessed. They spend their days and nights without interruption, inhabited. And so there's a village called Sidi Shamharush. And it's located in the Tobkal Mountains in about 40 kilometers south of Marrakesh. And it's a place where most people take their loved ones when there's no option left. Certainly when you've lived as long as both of us have, we've been in situations where we've run out of options for those people that we care about, and we become desperate. And so Sidi Shamarush is where the desperate people go. And it really, if you look at its location, you have to climb a good 45 minutes straight up a mountain to get to this village. It's, I suppose in the old days, like really, really old days, it would be something almost like a leper colony. But for this particular village, it's for people who are quite often possessed, and there's nowhere else for them to go.
Wow.
One of the first experiences that I had in that village, it kind of left a mark on me, because I saw the shrine, which is it's a giant white rock. Now, just to let you know how weird this is anyway, just in Morocco, is that Islam itself kind of makes multiple references to people who worship rocks. And it's supposed to be disparaging. It's not, they're not encouraging people to do it. Just in case one of your listeners was like, "Oh, I didn't know that's what they did." They're not they're not supposed to do that. So if you saw somebody doing it, that would be odd. So for me to go to a place where the shrine itself appeared to be one giant rock, I'm like, okay, now this is kind of interesting. Well, I didn't get close enough to this shrine, which again, as I was saying, it's a boulder and there's a hole that's cut into the boulder, and that's where the shrine is inside this hollowed out rock. And I heard a chorus of people kind of saying like Amin, like saying it's the same as Amen, right?
Amen.
And then there was a man who was praying in Arabic. I'll spare you that part. And then a woman who was crying, and then again the man would pray a bit more, and then I'd hear the group of people say Amin. And so it seemed like he was trying to help this woman. Well, finally I got the sand to go into the tunnel first, take my shoes off, obviously, and then work my way into the sanctum, the inside of this kind of cave-like shrine. And to my horror, I have to say at the time, it was just one woman making all of these sounds, clawing at the walls, and making all of these voices. So I'm not saying, as you, there's different angles to approach this. Obviously, there's a kind of supernatural, paranormal angle to it. I'm not saying anything more than this is what I saw. But what I can say, again, without any shadow of a doubt, is this was kind of the part two of how people live with the Djinn in Morocco. No Moroccan would look at, well, I would say few Moroccans would look at that woman and say, oh, I don't know what's going on, or I don't understand what's up with the Djinn, because they grow up with this idea. They grow up with the idea that that you can become possessed under different circumstances. Children are told, like, for example, do not leave the lights off in a bathroom, because that area, like an area where there's like a toilet and dirt or anything like that, these are areas that the Djinn like to be in the most, and it could transform your child forever. They're and they're sure of it. When we're talking about, we're not talking about people like this is just folks who are in a particular tax bracket, or I guess taxless bracket, because they're not making enough to tax them. But it's just they're educated people, and they're absolutely terrified of their children pouring hot water down a sink, because that can also get a Djinn to want to take revenge on you, possess you, and then you'll end up in Shamharush too eventually. So this is very day-to-day existence in Morocco, rather than it being something limited. You and I both lived in New Orleans for quite a while, and worked in New Orleans, and we know that that voodoo itself and even spiritualism itself, it was hit or miss. Like we'd have some people who were like way into it, way educated about it, and then you'd have a whole bunch of other people, a bunch of yahoos that absolutely had like zero idea about it and zero interest in it. I mean, if you're in New Orleans right now and you're a redneck, I don't miss you. No. Listen, I no, but you know what I'm talking about. Here it's even the spiritualism is much more homogenous. Where I think where we were, it was much more kind of, it would be concentrated in certain areas, in certain groups, and then it
Oh,
just didn't.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's kind of niche. Yeah, definitely. But so it's interesting because so you could do any innocuous thing, like turn the hot water on and then this. So these things are like waiting
You could say
for you.
You could say the name of a jinn. There's a jinn, for example, by the name of Aisha Khandisha. It's rather famous throughout Morocco. Throughout Morocco, it's the one jinn that that everybody agrees. Again, when I say everybody, please take it with a grain of salt. There are some people that don't buy it, but the majority of people think that there is a jinn, a female jinn, she's described differently by different people. Sometimes she's just this beautiful, very, very alluring woman. Sometimes I think she has like camel feet and the head of an animal. It depends on who you're talking to. But the name Aisha Khandisha comes up repeatedly throughout Morocco. And what can be funny sometimes is you'll be as far north as Tangier, and a Tangerian it would be talking to somebody from Marrakesh, and they would disagree about the existence of every other jinn. Like, oh no, that's fake. You guys made that up. Oh no, that yeah, like these things that could be entirely made up anyway. But they dismiss the idea that jinns A, B, and C exist, but only D, E, and F. But the one thing they all agree on is the existence of Aisha Khandisha. And when you say this name, again, you'll find educated people who will whisper, "God protect me." They do this thing where they spit into their shirt, like that, to protect themselves from Aisha Khandisha.
Wow. Sounds like the making of a good horror movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think they tried to do it, and they even used a rather popular Moroccan actor. There's a guy who, his name's slipping me. He was in a great movie by the renowned Moroccan director Nabil Ayouch. It's a film called Ali Zawa. Somebody did try to make a movie about Aisha Khandisha, but again, I think a straightforward documentary would be great. Just a straightforward, because there's so many, because I think the reality of this stuff, like if you made a fictionalized version of it, then everybody who thinks
do it justice.
You would, because everybody who already thinks it's a fiction
she would wind up a Disney princess in America. She would wind up a Disney princess, wouldn't she?
I'm not sure. It seems like Americans have developed a rather. If you guys have really gotten into the horror, supernatural stuff lately, it seems to be this kind of surfeit of movies coming out over here. And by the way, all of your horror movies here are kind of like documentaries for Moroccans. They really get into this stuff. They really, really like.
Oh, that's so cool. That is cool. No,
talk about movies like it's all real.
Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? This has been fabulous, and I, really, really appreciate you doing this. This really means a lot, and this has been amazing. But we are out of time, and I'm going to say goodnight to our people out here. This has just been wonderful. I can't thank you enough. I cannot thank you enough. We'll have to have you on again someday, somehow, and talk about other stuff, because this is just fabulous. But I'm going to say goodnight to everybody out there. Join us again for another episode of Paranormal Planet, when we have more of bizarre things from all around the world. And again, thank you, Jamal. This is just amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Great. Yeah, it was a real pleasure.